Mistakes are meant for learning, not repeating. But tell that to the world and watch how quickly it rejects the idea. The modern mind does not crave growth, it craves comfort. It does not seek transformation, it seeks repetition, familiarity, the illusion of movement while standing in the same place. Mistakes should be teachers, but most turn them into shackles, a cycle, a self-imposed purgatory, a never-ending loop of self-sabotage disguised as bad luck. The same people who wail about their suffering refuse to break free from the patterns that caused it. They do not learn, they relive. There is a psychological phenomenon known as repetition compulsion. It is the mind's tendency to repeat the same destructive behaviors, the same failed relationships, the same cycles of self-destruction, not because it wants to suffer, but because suffering is known. Pain becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes safe. People would rather dance with their demons than confront the void of the unknown. They would rather be miserable in a predictable way than risk the terror of real change. And so, the lesson is never learned. The mistake is never corrected. The cycle continues. But mistakes were never meant to be prisons. They were meant to be weapons, tools of refinement, sharpening mechanisms for the mind. A mistake, in its purest form, is a revelation. It is the universe tapping you on the shoulder and saying, "Not like that. Try again." It is a mirror held to your own blind spots, an invitation to evolve. But evolution requires pain, and pain for most is not something to be confronted. It is something to be avoided. And that is why so many remain exactly where they are. Society, of course, does not help. It encourages repetition. It thrives on the predictable, the controllable, the comfortable. It wants you looping, trapped in the same patterns, convinced that your failures are merely a part of fate, rather than correctable errors. Schools do not teach adaptability. They teach compliance. Workplaces do not encourage reinvention. They encourage obedience. The system does not reward those who learn from their mistakes. It rewards those who accept them as permanent conditions of life. The ones who escape the cycle do not do so because of luck. They do so because they refuse to let a mistake define them, because they understand that a mistake is only fatal if it is repeated. The strong dissect their failures like a scientist dissects an experiment. What went wrong? Where was the weakness? What can be adjusted? They do not wallow. They do not make excuses. They do not repeat the same error expecting a different result. Because that is not learning. That is insanity. The world fears those who refuse to repeat their mistakes. Because those people are uncontrollable. They do not fall for the same traps. Do not buy into the same narratives. Do not allow themselves to be pulled into the same predictable dramas. They move differently. They see patterns before they form. They anticipate deception before it arrives. And because of this, they are feared. Because a man who cannot be manipulated, who does not succumb to the same tricks as before, is a man who has become dangerous. Psychologically, breaking a cycle requires pain. The human mind resists change because change demands uncertainty, and uncertainty is terrifying. But the alternative is worse. To repeat a mistake is to choose suffering. It is to see the fire, to feel the burn, and to walk straight into it again, and again, and again, until there is nothing left of you but the ashes of wasted potential. Learning from a mistake requires stepping outside the known, embracing the discomfort of the unfamiliar, and risking failure in a new direction. This is where the weak fall. They mistake comfort for safety. They mistake habit for wisdom. They convince themselves that their suffering is inevitable rather than self-inflicted. They blame luck, blame fate, blame the world, anything but themselves. But reality does not care for blame. Reality only cares for results, and results do not change until you do, until the lesson is not just understood, but embodied, until the mistake is never repeated again. The strong do not fear mistakes, they use them. They carve their names into history through their failures, because every failure is another step closer to perfection. The greatest minds, the most unstoppable forces, are not those who never stumbled. They are the ones who stumbled once, twice, but never in the same way again. They adjusted, they evolved, and by the time the world caught up, they were unrecognizable, because the person who made the mistake was dead. In their place stood something new, something unstoppable. So ask yourself, how many times must you burn before you learn? How many cycles must you repeat before you break free? How long will you allow mistakes to define you rather than refine you? Because the world will not wait. Time will not pause. Memory is not nostalgia. It is not a museum of past experiences to be admired and romanticized. It is a weapon, a tool of survival, a meticulously built archive of patterns. The mind does not hold on to the past for sentiment. It does so for strategy. Every failure, every betrayal, every mistake is stored not to haunt, but to warn, to recognize a trap before it closes, to sense danger before it strikes, to sharpen instincts so that what once broke you will never break you again. But when the same mistakes are repeated, when history is ignored, when the mind fails to see the pattern, it is more than foolishness. It is defiance against the very mechanics of existence, a rejection of evolution, a spit in the face of how the universe operates. The cosmos functions through cycles, through intricate loops of cause and effect, through unrelenting laws that demand recognition. Nothing happens in isolation. Every action ripples outward, every choice carves a path, every mistake is a message. The universe does not whisper, it screams. It sends the same lesson over and over, each time louder, harsher, more devastating, until the message is heard. The fool will suffer through the same misfortunes, convinced that life is cruel, that fate is unjust. But fate does not punish, it instructs. And those who refuse to listen are doomed to learn through pain. Pattern recognition is the highest function of intelligence. Those who master it anticipate outcomes before they occur. They see deception before it manifests. They dismantle threats before they materialize. They understand that survival is not about reacting to the present. It is about predicting the future. And the future is always written in the patterns of the past. The ones who suffer endlessly are not cursed. They are blind. They dismiss their own history, ignore the signals, convince themselves that this time will be different. But reality does not change for the naive. It repeats. And those who do not recognize the repetition are prey. The purpose of memory is to prevent repetition, to ensure that a mistake does not become a habit, that a betrayal does not become a cycle, that suffering is not self-inflicted. But for many, memory is wasted. They experience the same wounds, endure the same betrayals, walk into the same traps, all by choice. And what is more insulting to the nature of existence than to suffer voluntarily? To be given the ability to adapt, to evolve, to rise above, and to refuse. That is the greatest offense to the natural order. That is self-betrayal at its highest form. The weak expect the universe to change instead of changing themselves. They believe that if they walk the same path enough times, if they engage with the same people, if they repeat the same behaviors, somehow the outcome will shift. But no amount of repetition alters the fundamental truth. Patterns do not break themselves. They must be broken. And those who fail to do so are not just victims of circumstance. They are co-conspirators in their own downfall. The human brain is an unparalleled machine of prediction. It holds the ability to process experiences, to extract lessons, to forecast danger. It has spent thousands of years evolving for this exact purpose, to ensure that survival is not dependent on luck, but on awareness. And yet, many squander this ability. They live in loops. They walk into their own destruction with open arms, blind to the flashing signs, deaf to the echoes of their own past. They learn nothing. They choose ignorance, and the universe, ever patient, allows them to destroy themselves. Every repeated mistake is an insult to intelligence. It is proof that self-awareness has been abandoned, that the greatest tool for survival has been discarded in favor of delusion. The mind remembers for a reason. It recalls pain so that it does not need to be felt again. It replays betrayal so that trust is given more carefully. It reminds of past failures so that future victories can be carved from their lessons. To dismiss these warnings, to walk forward as if blind, to fall where one has already fallen. This is the true definition of madness. Society rewards ignorance. It encourages mindless repetition. It preaches forgiveness for all, redemption without change. The idea that mistakes are not warnings, but mere inconveniences. And so, people fall into the same pits over and over, comforted by the belief that their suffering is an unavoidable fate, rather than an avoidable choice. But survival does not favor those who refuse to learn. Evolution does not accommodate stagnation, and the universe, ever merciless, will not grant a reprieve to those who spit in the face of its laws. Pattern recognition separates the strong from the weak. The ones who understand it move like ghosts through the battlefield of life, unscathed, unburdened, unbreakable. They do not wait to be wounded before they recognize a threat. They do not require disaster to understand caution. They rule their lives.